Good morning, everyone. I'm Vidhi Sharma and your MC for today. We are pleased to welcome you all to the 12th ReBitVlogs Majlis. Before we go ahead, here is our look at our agenda for the year. First, we'll have the welcome note. Then we will introduce the panelists, after which we will have a panel discussion in which the teams put forward their views, the experts will share their insights, the teams put forward their questions, and the experts will respond. After that, we will have a question and answer session with the audience, and then we'll have the closing. Kindly do know that the entire session is being photographed and video recorded for educational and promotional purposes. Now, to tell us a bit about ReBitVlogs, I would like to invite Dr. Zeenat Khan, the assistant professor here at UOWD and founding creative mind behind the Majlis, to tell us a bit about it.
Thank you so much, Vidhi. It's an absolute pleasure this morning to welcome all our student staff and, of course, our guest speakers here for the 12th ReBitVlogs iteration. This is a platform that was initiated in 2017, basically to engage students in discussions on pressing, business and technology use issues that we see on every day all around us. We believe it has a great link between students and academics with industry experts, government and non-government officials, and we have seen the impact it has had in effectively creating an environment of awareness and facilitating amazing dialogue towards a sustainable and responsible future. Every semester, we usually highlight one area of responsible IT use or business and leadership in order to shed some light on the importance of all aspects of human life when it comes to that particular topic. Interestingly, along with me, Professor Mario from University of Wollongong, Australia, and Miss Vinita Matthew from Sustainable Minds, we were the ones who developed the concept to what it is today. What is also very much interesting for us where ReBitVlogs is concerned is that in the 4 years that it's been running, we've actually won the Council for Australia-Arab Relations grant twice to establish an exchange program between Australia and UAE. In 2018, we welcomed students from Wollongong, Australia, who visited the Dubai campus. We did have the second round of grants in 2020 to take our students there. Unfortunately, of course, because of the pandemic, the borders were closed and there were restrictions in flights. So we ended up hosting a virtual 1-week exchange program where we had our students, Wollongong students, experts from both countries joining in and joining in dialogue over one whole week. So this is what ReBitVlogs is all about. We are hoping to continue this platform because we have seen the kind of impact it has on students and the kind of voice it's allowed students to have when they're talking about something that not necessarily people talk to students about. So over to you, Vidhi.
Thank you, Dr. Zeenat. The theme for this Majlis is remote work, technology, and intellectual property. The pandemic forced companies to move online, work remotely, and find ways to continue businesses. This led to issues in terms of privacy and confidentiality of information and brought to light the concern over employees plagiarizing work. Plagiarism, a term frequently associated with the academic world as a source concern, is now finding its way into the corporate world. While the topic is well documented and discussed in the academic world, very little is known about how it plays out in the corporate world, except that some studies have shown that students who have a tendency to engage in academic misconduct in academia also demonstrate propensity for unethical practices in the workplace. Preliminary discussions during a virtual summit in a Middle Eastern country involving participants from corporate sectors across the region revealed concerns over employees copying and pasting text, code, images, and other intellectual property when working on company reports or developing digital products. Particular concern arose over outsourcing of certain business functions, such as marketing and digital content creation. Some participants shared how they were pressured to create content for clients within unrealistic timeframes and expected to either copy from the web or simply reuse content previously created for other clients. From corporate giants such as Facebook and Apple Sherlocking developers to use their ideas as their own, to COVID-19 vaccine patent battle, infringements, and more. Companies globally have been facing IP dilemmas they earlier didn't. Imagine your surprise when you get NDA signed and have a virtual meeting only to find out your chosen platform clause allows attendees to take your ideas. A recent Delaware court trade secret decision, Smash Franchise Partners LLC versus Canada Holdings Incorporation, highlighted a trade secret owner who used the popular conferencing site Zoom to present information to potential franchisees, but failed to make full use of Zoom's security features. The trade secret owner sought and the court denied a preliminary injunction because it held that the trade secret owner had failed to take reasonable efforts to maintain confidentiality of the information, and any trade secret protection was lost. So how do we go forward and balance using technology to maintain integrity of intellectual property without exposing it to manipulation and theft? What is the answer to this dilemma? Are these issues real ethical issues in IT and businesses? This invited panel sifts through the sands of ethical dilemmas faced by governments, organizations, customers, and societies around the world, their consequences, and explores ways forward. We are honored and excited to welcome our panelists today. Our panelists for today are Dr. Shivdas Subramanyam is the head of biomedical forensic science within the School of Humanities Sciences at the University of Derby. He currently leads and coordinates an enthusiastic academic team in research-informed teaching, a successful researcher focusing on both biomedical science and pedagogic approaches in scientific teaching. Dr. Shiva specializes on the environmental and nutritional influences on early trophoblast invasion linking to pregnancy-related disorders such as preeclampsia. Likewise, his pedagogic research focuses on improving student engagement, academic integrity, including plagiarism awareness, deference, and medical ethics. He is one of the founding members of European Network of Academic Integrity, which was established via collaborations among several European universities supported by the Erasmus Plus Strategic Partnerships Project. Dr. Holly Tootle is a senior lecturer in information technology at the University of Wollongong. She is also a mom of 4 fun-loving redheads. Holly has 20 years of experience in higher education and is an experienced researcher in the social impact of technology. She has been awarded grants to research preschool children as co-designers of technology and to explore technology integration in multisensory environments. Holly's work explores meaningful ways to understand both the adult and child perspectives in IT research. Holly believes that if we can provide positive technology encounters for children, we can create a much-needed social shift. Holly loves working in multidisciplinary research teams. She passionately believes that our social and cultural breakthroughs will come from sharing and learning from each other, making our technology-based research accessible to all. Holly is committed to relearning Australia's history and growing her acknowledgement and understanding of the traditional custodians and the knowledge held in the country. In order to select our student panelists, we had an initiative on campus. The storytelling and poster competition at UOWD took place this semester virtually. 4 winning teams were chosen based on judges' scores. Each team selected a speaker who are joining our industry experts. First to win is being represented by Edwin D'Souza. The second team speaker is Mazen Zaki. The third team speaker is Mahin Umar. And the final team speaker is Hassan Gori. Welcome, everyone. Finally, the panel is moderated by Dr. Zeenat Khan, and the Twitter and question and answer will be handled by myself. Now, with a minute to organize the panel, we will move to the next segment of today's Majlis, the panel discussion. May I please request everyone that once the discussion Majlis begins, please do not unmute your mics or activate your webcams. Sit back and enjoy the panel discussion. Don't forget to use the Twitter to ask questions.
As expected, Webex did what it was supposed to and it happily kicked me out and I'm back. All right, so I'll just quickly. Could I please ask all the speakers to activate your webcams? Welcome, Hassan. Hi, Edwin. Welcome. Welcome, Maheen. I think we're still waiting for Mazen. Welcome, Mazen. Okay. Thank you so much, Vidhi, for the first segment. It's always a pleasure to look at the history and look at the kind of competitions that happen and the winners that have come through. So congratulations, of course, to the 4 teams that made it and to the speakers who are here today. As you can see, the topic is quite exciting. We are looking at technology, we're looking at remote work and how companies have been facing, in fact, issues in terms of intellectual property theft, copying and pasting of information from somebody else's work, using platforms without really realizing the kind of security, risks to intellectual property, and so much more. So we will just jump right in at this point. I would like to start with probably Edwin. Edwin, tell us a little bit about this problem issue of intellectual property protection and theft from the government perspective. What have you seen happening in the kind of research that you have done?
Um, so, do I start off with my speech or do I just
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished members of the panel and all present today. My team members and I welcome you and all and appreciate you for taking the time off your schedule to join us in these deliberations. Intellectual property theft has cost companies over $1.7 trillion in lost revenue. Laws have always protected an owner's intellectual property, but what if these rights were infringed upon by higher political affiliated government administrations? In fact, what are the government's point of view or reasons to resort to such cases? Today, I'll be diving into the case of the Biden administration's support in waiving intellectual property related to COVID vaccines. The reason behind this stance and why this could prove to be a wrong step not only for America but to the world as well. The TRIPS waiver refers to a proposal advanced by governments of South Africa and India to the World Trade Organization to waive intellectual property rights for technologies required to prevent, contain, or treat COVID-19 until widespread vaccination is in place globally and the majority of the world's population has developed immunity. Although the waiver is temporary, the topic has stirred up discussions on both sides of the spectrum defending the ethics they resonate with. Proponents of the waiver argue that the companies manufacturing the vaccines were made possible through taxpayer dollars funding research, development costs, or through purchase guarantees, or possibly a mixture of both. They also point out that the production of vaccine likely involves the use of other companies' patent equipment or processes, so waiving protections on one intellectual property does not guarantee the entire recipe for a vaccine. Furthermore, the proponents believe that the waiver may accelerate the production of vaccines in developing countries by giving vaccine manufacturers the leverage to operate freely with no restrictions imposed on them, which in turn could help vaccines reach out to underdeveloped nations. Although the arguments made by the proponents of the waiver portray an act of selfless intent, the question still remains unanswered or even worse, never brought up. Is this a theft of intellectual property by the government? This further begs the question, were the actions justified? The opposing spectrum might be perceived to be solely bothered by monetary benefit. This is not true as both spectrums do look at the monetary benefits. The opposing views do give insight into the cost of compromising intellectual property. India and South Africa are one of the largest producers of generic drugs. though they have less expertise and the capacity to make complex biologics like the mRNA vaccines. To support my argument, Moderna has been working on the mRNA vaccines for over a decade now, whereas Ditto has been working on it for nearly about 3 decades. Though the proponents to the waiver believe that production of vaccines would increase the number of vaccines worldwide, it could impede safe vaccine production. Handing over patents and forcing technological transfer will enable China and low-income countries to manufacture US biotech products on their own, thus making the need of American vaccines redundant. The US has spent years deploring China's theft of American intellectual property, and now Biden's administration may voluntarily let China reap the profits of decades worth of American innovation. Seeing both sides of the spectrum, I'd like to add a few suggestions. If the Biden administration desires an increase in global supply, they could negotiate bilateral vaccine agreements and export in excess from the US. To increase production, the Biden administration could spend more to help um, to help these companies increase their production and reduce costs for exports. Even if the production has to be outsourced, the licensing agreement would allow the companies to share their intellectual property while maintaining quality control. As I conclude, I'd like each one of us here today to ponder the ethical dilemma in question. Should intellectual property be compromised for the potential benefit, and I stress again, potential benefit of hundreds of millions of people worldwide? I'd like to have a definite answer to share with you all, but only time will tell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edwin. I think that was a great start, and you've posed quite a strong question to the panel. Let's see how this progresses as we go forward. I will probably jump now to Mazen. So, Mazen, we've heard from the government perspective, and I think the example that Edwin brought forward with the Biden administration and the COVID vaccine is a very valid one, right? Obviously, governments want this to be, vaccine is something that should be made available to everybody. But at the same time, we have to look at the dimes and dollars, so to speak, right? So, from the corporate sector perspective, what do you think are the kind of issues when it comes to intellectual property?
Indeed. First, good morning, everyone. I'll be discussing the intellectual property theft during remote work from the point of view of the corporate sector. First, remote work has been around for a very long time now, but it was only during the COVID-19 pandemic that a spotlight was directed at it. While most thought of remote control as a blessing, it did come with its drawbacks. One of them being being the surge on the number of amount of intellectual property thefts and data breaches faced by companies. This rise has attributed to the inability of organizations worldwide to cope with the sudden shift to remote control, to remote work, and their weak remote security infrastructure. The volume of records that were compromised during the year 2020 came in as 37 billion, a whopping 141% increase from the previous year, the largest number that has been seen since the year 2005. As of 2020, the average data breach costs is $3.86 million and takes a total of 280 days from identification to containment. In a survey conducted by Apicorn, 35% of IT decision makers in the UK have admitted that remote workers have knowingly put the company at risk, and at least 10% have no control over where the company's data itself is stored, and 12% do not securely support remote work. Another considerable risk to the safety of a corporation's information is the lack of know-how of the employees itself to keep themselves and the companies safe. Even if they intend to do so, they can't keep up with their claims. To demonstrate how important the security of intellectual property is, we can take a recent case that was filed by Tesla against its former employee, Alex Kalanoff. He downloaded around 26,000 confidential files from Tesla's servers within 3 days of his hiring only. Tesla claims that the file downloaded took 200 man-years to develop and contained all the automation scripts created over the last 12 years by their quality assurance engineering team. The types of files stolen were of very high value to the Tesla competitors. This situation could have easily led to large-scale losses for Tesla if their security team hadn't managed to catch Alex within only 1 day and make sure all the files were deleted from his computer and personal Dropbox. Companies should take Tesla's example and bring themselves to speed up with the technological standards. In order to do so, it's important for the companies to establish amenities such that only corporate-sponsored devices can access the company's sensitive data, and utilize endpoint security methods to accommodate the increased use of cloud storage, monitor and manage the files and applications that are utilized on any distinguished endpoint. In conclusion, the shift to remote work has outdated the number of intellectual property theft cases in the past year only. This can be solely attributed to the lower perception risk by employees and members of the public alike, and negligence of security due to the fact that organizations were mainly focused on smoothing the remote work experience during the early stages of the pandemic. This has caused a multiple loss for all organizations worldwide in terms of monetary resources and well-being of their own employees, which has been very hard for not just employees, but company owners. Thank you.
Wow, fantastic. That's amazing data that you have actually presented to us. That's a lot of money's worth of intellectual property that is being lost, and it's shocking to hear that employers don't realize it's the employees who are the biggest threats sometimes when you're thinking about the safety of intellectual property at your own company, and the fact that the lack of know-how. I think Vidhi's also talked about that example of a company that shared their trade secret over a Zoom meeting and then realized they hadn't put in their securities in place enough to, although they had an NDA signed, it didn't really cover a public space like a Zoom meeting or let's say a Webex meeting, right? So, and specifically because you talked about technology, I think I'm going to jump to at this stage to Maheen. And let's talk a little bit, Maheen, about the technology itself. What are we seeing when it comes to remote work and technology and the kind of issues that Edwin and Mazen have been talking about?
Yes, of course. Ever since the pandemic has hit, it's been about 2 years, almost 2 years at this point. So these platforms, video calling platforms like Zoom, Webex, of Microsoft Teams, they become a household name. Everybody has them. From students to employees, everyone shifted to remote work due to, of course, the dangers of on-site working. So having safe technological platforms to not only protect like an individual's personal information, but for companies to keep their trade secrets and their intellectual property safe, it's become a necessity. Zoom is currently the most famous platform on the internet for remote working, but they initially saw an unprecedented boom when the pandemic first hit. Their sales actually jumped a solid 169% in just the first 3 months. But soon after people started using Zoom, they realized that, they came across many privacy issues, which were mostly as a result of Zoom not having expected that certain things would even ever take place. Like hackers were guessing meeting IDs and joining them, which was actually later called Zoom bombing, as you might have heard. Zoom was also accused of sending their users' information from their meetings to Facebook. So these cases and many more, they made Zoom change their privacy policies and update their systems to provide a safe platform for all of its users. Some of the changes that they made were they changed their terms of service. They added several more clauses that clearly stated their copyright laws that were preventing a user from reusing any information that was being shared in the meetings without getting consent from the owner first. It was, they also enabled a feature that would alert a new user if they're joining a meeting and the meeting is being recorded. They started a new feature that would give a user a chance to leave before, that gives them more control of their own privacy. So all of these features and more were taken because all companies seek to provide and ensure placing the most efficient security measures to defend their companies against cyber attacks and to protect their companies intellectual properties, as well as their employees' personal information. A living proof of this is the security technologies that were developed by Cisco. Now, what Cisco does is they assign random IDs to their meeting attendees, which makes it difficult for anybody outside the organization who could have a malicious intent to get access to the meeting. The company also implements their OAuth protocol, which is used to grant access to information from outside without leaking any credentials. There's another feature that Cisco provides, which I believe would help companies keep their meeting information safe, is that if one of the participants in the Webex meeting, they try to take a screenshot and upload it to like their social media platforms or something, and that's something that employers, they wouldn't be able to monitor now because we're working remotely. So what Webex does, it hides any sensitive information, room information that could be in the screenshot, that makes sure like the meeting information is not disclosed to anyone. Also, like when you keep like a recording of the meeting, it's now more secure because they have this unique encryption applied on all their meetings, which we ourselves as students, like we've seen for our classes. And these meetings are all saved like locally. It's not saved on their servers. So there's lesser chance of them being illegally accessed. There's these changes, and there are many other features that came because of the increase in remote working. But of course, regardless of so many measures being taken, hackers and such, they can always still find loopholes in the security measures, which just goes on to demonstrate the importance of progressive development of new and more reliable security measures as new threats are arising frequently, which is why these companies, they're still working to increase and further tighten up their privacy and security protocols. But regardless of how it started, especially like with Zoom, I believe we're still in a better place now where, companies, schools, individuals, everywhere, we're able to use these platforms every day with ease and a peace of mind, in this new era of almost 100% digital working. Yeah, so that's about it.
Thank you so much, Maheen. I think what you have just explained is the kind of effort that we have seen in the way companies have tried to make their platforms more secure for people to use so that they feel more comfortable. And I think you're right. At the beginning, Zoom was a mess. The kind of Zoom bombing stories that we got to hear was quite scary. But however, they also had the features. They had a lot of the breakout session features, the emojis, and all of those fun things that you want to do that helps us create a very physical experience in a virtual space. But I think, like, for instance, Webex has pretty much caught up. Like, we can see we've been using it at our university. So you're right. I think there are these security measures that have come in place, but we still see that there's a gap. In fact, Mazen had said that the lack of know-how seems to be a huge barrier when it comes to companies and employees using these platforms to ensure the kind of protection that they should have for the intellectual property that they're sharing across without not necessarily without knowing. We will move on to Hassan, last student speaker in the panel. Hassan, we want to hear from you in terms of the intellectual properties themselves. Of course, everybody's been talking about it from different perspectives, like whether it's government or corporate or the technology, but let's talk about the intellectual property themselves and the rights that are out there, and to what extent do you think that really works or doesn't work when it comes to protecting people's intellectual property?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Professor Shiva and Dr. Holly. And the intellectual property is a very sensitive topic, and at the same time is very complicated, because because intellectual property depends on the area, the country. They make their own laws upon what is patent, what is trademark, what is trade secrets, and what is copyrighted. That intellectual property refers to the right of the people's idea, according to the World Trade Organization. So, like, when it's being used by people is very complicated, as corporate people, the technology, the companies, when they copyright something, they copyright everything. For example, right now, Webex, your comment on YouTube, everything is copyrighted. Even the design of a mobile phone, literally everything is copyrighted so that nobody copies. Now there's places where it's being misused when consumers, there's like mostly greed. Like there's two types of greed. There's the consumer greed and there's the corporate greed. Corporate greed where everything is patented, everything is copyrighted, that even nobody can even make a copy consumer friendly to help benefit the society. And there's the consumer greed where people like can copy anything. They want everything for free, and then they want to just sell it out there for people to get. That's and if anybody interferes, they will say this is the right to our interest. They want everything for free. Famous example is BitTorrent. Anybody can copy anything, copy a game and get it for free. If you mess with that, that's the conflict of interest or conflict of invading their right to copy stuff and just sell it for free. Now, because of intellectual property is been misused a lot by if you're like a big corporation like Facebook, Apple, all of them have like money and influence and power. They can do whatever they want, and even if they do copy stuff from somebody, they will can get away with it because they have influence and power. Facebook has taken at least more around 90 assets they have bought of competitors who think they might be competitive in the future, and sometimes they just copy their data, copy their data, and then make a replica of it. And then of course there are different ways people can what's the word, get a hold of it by making by for either the legislating, or they can do it mediating, or like a negotiation about what we can do, or they can even go against themselves, like talk to the infringement people, come to an agreement, make new partnership, get some more profit. But most of the time it goes to the lawsuit, and the lawsuit is that it's not that easy because it's very expensive. And if you're a big company like Facebook, you can easily, they have an army of lawyers who can like say we can defend their right to do what they want. But small businesses don't have the luxury to invest so much, and it can also take a long time and lots of money. Sometimes people just go out of business and they can't do anything. And sometimes people say, but it's competitive, intellectual property patented, nobody can steal the data and stuff like that. But look at this, if you have if it's competitive, but companies don't look at the development of society anymore. They're mostly looking for market share. If you have something and they just want to penetrate it and make it so they can benefit more. And then Facebook, of course, they have say that there's a lot of people who want to start businesses. They can come over here. We can do this. We can do that. But that's true and not true at the same time, because there's always something that Facebook does that they don't tell the people, and they just say no, we didn't do anything. And they're always prepared if anybody accuses them of something. There's also you fear government. You don't fear government more. You fear big tech company like Facebook, Google, or Apple, because if you go against the government, they can't do much. But if you go against Google or these tech companies, you can ruin your future, because you can't even get a job in the future if they go against you, and they will even take money from you if you're wrong, and all these negotiations take place. So it's a very abusive of intellectual property, where some people can't even do what they want, like taking in the remote learning, even people also, there's a lot of breaches, people had mentioned there was a lot of breaches about what is happening in the remote working. Some people actually take selfies of that and then post in the internet with their projects showing, and then people can copy that. There's also about the cloud of the Tesla case. There's also Facebook share locking. There's also Apple. There's plenty of things that happens during this remote working, and is going to continue to do so until something happens. But it's a very outdated, and then our intellectual property doesn't actually help in the future about what's going to happen, since people paid in so much that other competitors can't do much against them.
Wow, I think a very passionate take on intellectual property and the issues that we are seeing. And I think this goes right back to Edwin's, what Edwin said about the whole vaccine being patented. Do we patent the vaccines to ensure that the companies get back the kind of profits that they should be making for the R&D and the cost and the taxpayers' money, etc.? Or do we ensure that it's readily available to everybody because it's a pandemic, and everybody needs to be able to access this kind of vaccine? So I think we've come a full circle with that discussion. So at this point, I will actually welcome Dr. Holly Tootle to tell us a little bit about your take on intellectual property during remote work and the kind of things that you see happening where technology is concerned.
Thanks very much, Zenith. And look, I'm I'm quite nervous. I'm coming to you from New South Wales, Australia, and we're in week 7 of our hard lockdown as our case numbers are starting to climb. They're still very small compared to a lot of international cases, but for us, it's been a trigger. So I'm currently locked in the downstairs room of my house while my 4 children and husband destroy my upstairs. So wish me luck. My take on this is that during this time, and particularly this pandemic period that you've picked, we've seen a lot of decisions that would ordinarily be part of business decision making be amplified, and we've seen the cracks in our existing systems. And I think what this time has done has put us in a pressure cooker situation where decisions that were being worked on or put off because they were too difficult have suddenly got to a point where they can't be ignored anymore. And all 4 of you have really impressed me with your take on the different perspectives of what you've done in your analysis. Just touching on the ideas that came through, the idea of waiving IP rights, the precedent that sets is so dangerous. And yet, wearing my ethics hat, we're in a pandemic. There's thousands of people dying a day. We haven't seen a pandemic like this for hundreds of years. And utilitarianism would tell us that we have to do the right thing for the most people right now. And to me, and my personal operating system, that is to put profit to one side right now and to say we have to get the solution out to the people who need it most. And for countries, you may have seen, I don't know how important Australia is in your news cycle, our Prime Minister has just taken 1 million doses of Pfizer from the global stockpile. I think it was Poland that came to our rescue to do a mass vaccination over the next 2 weeks in a certain part of my state. And there's been criticism of that because Australia is a wealthy country. We do have resources here, but we've hit our own challenges. And I think that's what this pandemic has done to the world, that so often we've worked in this globalization framework. But when all of those borders shut, our mobility stopped, our reliance on our own systems and setups, just about every structure and framework we had around us has collapsed. And it was foreseeable. If it wasn't COVID-19, there was some other disruption that would come our way. So I think this has just forced a hand on the part of governments particularly, and on corporations to really rethink what it means to be an employee of an organization. I know for me at the moment, I'm working from home and schooling of my 4 children. It's just a mess. There's no clear delineation between Dr. Holly Tootle, lecturer, academic, sensible, normal person, versus Holly Tootle, mother extraordinaire who's trying not to scream at her kids and trying not to let them eat too much chocolate. I'm just one big blob of a person at the moment, and it's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for the world we're talking about. When I look at your corporate sector point, the Marsden brought up, the employees are often the biggest threat. When we look at risk analysis, it's the ones closest to us that are often the greatest risk, and whether that's in who you're likely to be murdered by or who's likely to threaten the security of your IT system. And it's a pretty dark drawing I've put there, sorry about that. Companies have let IT systems and employees just roll along because it hasn't been important enough to deal with. We've had other issues. And now I'm stuck at home. I'm naughty because I haven't dialed in via the VPN. So technically I should be through my VPN, through Webex and whatever, but the more systems I hook in, plus 4 children using the internet upstairs, plus a husband trying to teach a class, my internet will fall over, so I don't do it. And I know I should be doing it. When we look at the technology platforms, you raised some really great examples, Mahin, about Zoom and Webex. And it's been a real divide amongst users. I'm definitely a Zoom person. This Webex thing freaks me out and I can break it far more easily than Zoom. But everyone, and this speaks back to all of the points you raised, especially you, Hassan, at the end, the IP that went into developing Zoom, it had some serious flaws, and they've had to pivot on the spot, fix those flaws. Companies have had to put in new arrangements about what you can screenshot, what you can't, what you can copy, what you can share. but we've done it all in an instant, under pressure, in traumatic circumstances. And my summing up is that anything that you've raised today has to be given the context of in a pandemic. In a pandemic, these were the best decisions that we could make. And in a pandemic, this is what we will do after the pandemic, because there has to be an after. It might be 2030 at this rate, but there will be an after. We then need to revisit all of those decisions and say they were fit for a pandemic, but is that how we want to continue? And I think all of your teams talked about that change today and recognizing that this is how it sat within this context of COVID. Thank you, Zenith.
Yeah, brilliant, Holly. Exactly how you described it, and you made it so personal. I think everybody relates to that, because I think everybody's put on these multiple caps at the same time, where we used to be able to take one off and put one on, and we are not able to do that anymore. And I think that kind of stress actually also leads to the kind of issues we do see in the corporate sector with employees just copying and pasting things from here and there when they've got tight deadlines, for instance, right? They may not necessarily want to infringe on somebody else's intellectual property, but hey, the technology is there. It's just quick fix. I have to jump into the the kitchen to make sure my kids got food. So what's the quickest way to ensure I've met the deadline? Let's just copy and paste from somewhere and just give it off as my own, right? And I think even as students, we understand that, because plagiarism is an issue when it comes to higher, any kind of not just higher education, but even in schools. So at this point, because we are still talking about COVID-19 and the pandemic, I would like to invite Dr. Shiva into this conversation. From your medical background and experience, Dr. Shiva, what do you think are the impacts of intellectual property rights and the kind of thefts that we are hearing about? Sorry, Dr. Shiva, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks, Janice, and thanks, Holly, for making my life easy, because I was worried that Holly might talk more or less away from what I wanted to talk. So I think more or less we are on the same page. But before that, I wanted to thank all the student contributors. And I mean, I think this is the second or third time I'm linking with this activity. And every time I come in, I could see that the standards of the student presenters are increasing, always increasing. And I'm really amazed. I think each one of them, when they research, they lived with it rather than doing it for the sake of doing it, because they are so passionate about it. So it started very well with Edwin, because he posed the question in such a way that others can join in, people like me can join in as well. So first of all, I need to confess that I'm from biomedical and medical area. So for me, IP stand for intellectual property, and then most of you can understand, but there's the IT part of IP address as well. So I'm not going to go into the IP address at the moment, because I don't know anything about IP address. I only know about the intellectual property. Let me start with a small, my own experience. That one of the things is I wanted to know about toughened glasses from one of my engineering lecturer. So remember that we work in a university. So I sent an email. I mean, this has happened even before, but this pre-pandemic is about 2 or 3 years ago. I just put it in the emails. Can you explain about the toughened glasses? I just wanted to know how it was made. It's more or less scientific rather than anything. I'm not interested. But from that day onwards, for the next 2 or 3 months, I'm getting posts and advertisement on my Facebook, toughened glasses, greenhouses, everything is about glasses. Remember, it's a secure email. It's a university email, internal email from one lecturer to another lecturer. Still, I can't understand. Probably the people like you who are involved in IT, you might know why it has happened. Still, I can't understand. So even before this pandemic, we were vulnerable to this kind of, I call it hacking or espionage or whatever. And about the Zoom, like to talk about a little bit of Zoom. Is this actually happened to one of my friends, a lecturer. She was delivering, this is actually during the pandemic. She was delivering a lecture through Zoom. It's about 100 students there. And it was recorded, and immediately, or at the end of the lecture, there was a big voice, "This is the rubbish lecture ever." And after that, we checked with our IT system. They came and checked. Is somebody, still we couldn't find who they are. They are not even attached to the university. So this is how the Zoom has got, I call it, holes in their system. So talking about the medical perspective, so to be honest, Holly has already set the scene for me that as a biomedical background person, we wanted to improve the health and healthcare of all the public, not only in UK, not only in Sri Lanka, everywhere. The world population should live happily as long as they can. So that is our aim. So I was one of those people who were really happy. Then there was an agreement saying that we are going to waive this intellectual property as far as this vaccine is concerned. But before we go into this vaccine, because these vaccines are marvelous products and questionable products as well. I'm saying why they are questionable products, because normally any vaccine to be developed, it will start with the pre-discovery phase, which will take about 3 to 6 years. Discovery page, another stage, another, say, 3 or 4 years. Preclinical trial, minimum 2 years. Clinical trial, another 1 year or minimum 1 year. And then go to the FDA approval, MHRA approval in UK, or in Australia, the equivalent approval. But everything happened in 10 months for these vaccine, not this vaccine, these vaccine. The reason being, they remove this patentee and intellectual property, and scientists from all over the world work collaboratively. And also the phase 1, we call it phase 1 trial, phase 2, phase 3. And they were normally phase 1 followed by phase 2, phase 3 clinical. But because of the collaboration, they were able to carry out all these simultaneously. There are some health and safety issues about that. Let's not worry about that, because we were actually, they were at one point they were carrying out clinical trials before they analyzed the health and safety of the vaccine developed. But that's the way it is, because that's an immediate need, immediate threat. We need to work together. So to be honest, the vaccines development, whatever the vaccine, AstraZeneca or Pfizer or whatever, is a success. It's a success for medical innovation and invention. But the problem with that is even with removal of all these intellectual properties and the patency things and working collaboratively, a good example is, I'm not directly involved in the AstraZeneca, but I know people who were involved in the AstraZeneca because it was started in the UK, and the way they work collaboratively with Indian research companies and UK research company, it was really marvelous. And because of that, we produced it. But after that, as Holly has suggested, that once when this moved on to the mass production, that is where the countries with money become a kind of selfishness. But I won't say selfishness, you know, you need to protect your own people first. Then only you can think about others. So yes, I am in a more or less in a probably I am neither here or nor there about the vaccines are not being widely shared. Because I mean, like our Prime Minister normally says that I am more concerned about my people first, but that doesn't mean I'm not helping the others. He actually does that, but we wanted him to do more, but yeah, he is doing that anyway. By the way, I'm not a good fan of my Prime Minister, so don't think that I'm supporting him. I'm just telling the truth. So the problem is, even with all these intellectual properties and the patency has been removed, there are about, especially linked to the vaccine development, the UK National Cybersecurity Center has recently published that there are actually there are thousands of investigation is actually happening of trying to hack the developmental process. Only the two culprit countries I mean, outside Europe, but I don't want to, I mean, it's nothing to do, because it's an international forum, I don't want to name those countries, but none of the countries you or I are from are involved. But there are two countries, not countries, I mean, mainly some certain organization, they try to hack especially the development. And also, you know, there is an accusation about China that they knew the genomic sequence of the virus very long time ago, and they didn't share it with anyone else. But that is the other side of the intellectual property, because at that time, the patency law was there. So they haven't done anything wrong. So these are the problem. I mean, as far as I am concerned, that what they have done for this particular incident, that means the pandemic, I would support that. And that's the reason we had it, the vaccine. Whether they are working or whether they have side effects, that's a different story. Anything will have side effect, you know. If you don't trust me, then take the 16 paracetamol, you know how the side effects would be. So anything would have side effects. So my side of the argument is that, to the answer to Edwin de Souza's first question, is that IP, intellectual property, in particular cases or when there is a pandemic like this, I think we need to compromise that for the greater good of the entire world population. With that, I will stop. I can talk a lot, but you know, Zeenat, if I start talking, then I will talk forever.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Shiva. I think you've given us like a nice understanding of the development process of vaccines and why it is important, in fact, to actually hold on to the intellectual property and, you know, to protect it with the rights that are available. But you've also mentioned, because it's a pandemic, of course, it's the ethical thing to do to make it more, widely available to everybody. What I would really like to ask you, because you're from the medical background, is have you seen or heard of a spike or increase in these kind of threats to intellectual properties that are being protected because of easy access, because of the technology, because of remote working, because, you know, a lot of us are working from home. So do you think that has impacted the medical industry, the sector?
I mean, this is not me, and this is actually I read it from the FDA website. Actually, what they are saying is, yes, it has made the what you call remote working has increased the chances of getting hacked, and then intellectual property breaches has happened, not only in medicine but also in other areas as well. And the the simplest form of, I mean, I think just to give an example of how easy to do those things is that, I mean, there was a case came to my attention. There's one student trying to hack into another student's work, and then it highlighted as plagiarism. But the first student who actually wrote the real author, she has more or less provided proof that this is that is her own work, and there's no way she could have passed it on to that other person. And still is the investigation is still going on, because we have involved IT people, but the IT person who is investigating that, he said that he needs some time to prove it, but he suspect that actually he hacked into her computer and downloaded it. So it is that easy. So if a student can do that, then you know, some companies in, I mean, I can't say that because this everybody's knowledge in some companies in Russia and China, the company's objective is that hacking is their objective. So they know how to do those things. So actually, the remote working has increased the vulnerability. And again, Holly has rightfully highlighted, and you know, I am supposed to use the VPN address all the time, but I can't because of the internet weakness. I mean, I don't know why in my area during the lunchtime my internet goes very weak, and I don't give any lectures during the lunchtime because of that. So because of that, I don't use the VPN. And there are some practical issues on VPN, using VPN. And I have a feeling that one or two lecturers told me that there is a way to hack into VPN as well. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. I think at this point I'm going to kind of bounce back to Dr. Holly. Dr. Holly, do you think it is because of remote work that we are seeing this level of, you know, threat to intellectual property? Do you think it's because of the technology, or do you think it's just, you know, it's like you said, you know, there's like a lot of things that we've just been doing, and now it just exacerbated because it's like everything is under the microscope. What is your take on that?
You've introduced one of my favorite topics, so be sure to cut me off because I am a crazy old lecturer that can talk for hours. I'm very much of the opinion that technology is neutral. It always has been. The technology itself doesn't cause the problem. It's the human's use of technology. And just as my colleague was saying, I think it's the ethics that sits behind this that's the core issue here. And we're living in an age where the technology is in the driving seat. We want more technology. We want to see how far we can push all of these technologies. But we've done that at the expense of educating the masses about IT ethics. And this is a very big passion topic for me. I've taught ethics my whole career, and it's one of my, it's how I got to meet Zenith in the first place. But I think these IT ethics now more than ever need to be embedded in any technology-driven degree, and even smaller than that. So within our degrees, whether you're a developer of the technology or an implementer of technology-based solutions, you have to have a huge, a holistic understanding of what ethics means and what the implications are. And we're seeing driverless cars is one of the great test beds. We're seeing countries now, Germany is the country that comes to mind, that now recognize artificial intelligence as a sentient human or participant of their society that can be fined and charged with murder. They're the first ones to come on board with that idea that some of this technology we're creating is taking the place of a human and therefore should be held responsible to that account. And when you're learning to program, when you're doing all those, I'm allergic to programming, I hate it, so this will sound bad, but when you're learning how many moves a knight can make on a chessboard, or one of those other algorithmic approaches to programming. In the back of your mind, you're not thinking that I might build a technology that could harm a human. That's just not there. It's so separated. You're talking algorithms, you're talking pseudocode, you're talking bits, binary objects. But we have to keep bringing our students who build code back to that human connection. They could write all the code they want, but unless there's a human at the other end using it, it won't be for anything. As part of my research, I'm attached to a group of researchers that go to preschool age children. So I'm talking 3 to 5 year olds, little tiny people that make lots of noise and mess. We're teaching them about ethics. And one of the ways we're doing that, and particularly, I don't know whether you have these things in your country, but mobile phones are used everywhere. Sorry, you can't see it because it keeps going. Smartphones. Our children are using these so much. And what we've done is given them a picture. They had to draw a picture on a bit of paper, and then across a bit of string, they send their picture to their friend, but then the friend sent the picture to someone else. And even 3 to 5 year olds are able to understand that concept of sharing and whether they let somebody have access to something or not. And like I said, passion point for me, absolutely at university level, but this has to come back through to our very youngest of children and embed with them that sense of right and wrong in terms of whether it's intellectual property or misappropriation of technology. There's so many different angles you brought up. And Edwin, that question where you came at us at the start, should it be compromised for the benefit of many people? That's going to come up in so many different situations with technology we have right now. Just in the medical field, looking at different ways that countries are able to support their ailing populations. There's such a disparity of the countries who have technology and solutions at their disposal and countries that do not. And I think what this pandemic has really thrown out to us, sorry to bring it back to that again, is that that gap is just ever widening. And we actually have an opportunity to turn a lot of our expectations on their head right now and to make some different choices. So there's a lot of rhetoric around there about returning to normal. I'm not actually sure I want to go back to what we had.
Yeah.
It was not great, and there were lots of problems with what we were doing. So this is our chance to press a reset and to rethink some of those value-driven ideals that we have. And we're seeing that countries can work together without killing each other and without worrying too much about their intellectual properties. And you see that on an even smaller scale within organisations, that for all of you as students, you've really had to pull together to be able to study in this remote format. Your teachers are doing extraordinary things to make this experience work. We have a lot of international students in my classes. So you're saying I start teaching at 8:30 a.m. my time, which is 5 hours before now or something, a lot of hours, 6 hours. I've got students starting to study at 1:30 and 2:30 a.m. just so they can come online and hear me talk to them. It's just ridiculous. So I think we need to think carefully about the different types of information technologies we engage with and really use this time to think through what it is we want to have to carry forward. What sort of future do we want to create for the children that you either have or will have, and to just get them to question the value of what it is they're engaging with. Because for me, it's the connections between humanity that have become far more important than any of the technology pieces that I own.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Holly. And your passion really comes through when you talk about this. For our class guys, she was the counterpart teaching this subject at Wollongong. Of course, they were teaching the subject way before I came into the picture. And that's how I know her and my PhD supervisor, Dr. Mark. So at this point, I'm going to jump back to Edwin. Edwin, you started off by talking about governments, and you put forward a case and a question. So having heard everything that you have, what's your take now? And what do you think really is the role that governments can play in protecting intellectual property or not protecting intellectual property?
One of the things I'm most particular about is by nature I like to have things that benefits both sides rather than really lean towards one. And for one of the reasons that I have mentioned is that instead of handing out the patents to the world, which sounds great in its moral values. Um, First, let me trace back a bit. And one of the things when I was researching on this topic, interestingly, is that every time I tried to search about the Biden administration, a lot of articles were for the uh, what do you say? Uh, waiver of this intellectual property. And it began to question was why is this so? Why are a lot of people on this side? A lot. In fact, I could find barely two articles, and mostly it was usually political, the left wing, the right wing, and so on. Like, okay, it's for Americans, and we are for the benefit of the world. And so I really had to question as to why was this. And one of the things I came across was something that we think about corporate across the world as the greedy snorting pigs who steal money from the poor. That's usually the mindset that people go along with corporates in general. Any documentary you've watched on corporates, you always see them as the villain in this story. So by nature, most of us are going to say that, well, you know what? It's for the benefit of hundreds of millions of people. But you know what? Let corporates have a taste of their own medicine. It kind of subconsciously renders the idea that uh, the loss of intellectual property. And I brought this up even, in fact, in my speech, as to people not even questioning whether this is theft of intellectual property. They don't even come to the point of uh, theft of intellectual property. And one of the things I was keen upon was the opposing view had mentioned uh, on waiving intellectual property was about the safety of the vaccine because a lot of this takes years of research. The mRNA technology that was used took years of research. It doesn't come within a span of 2 months and 3 months. And so expecting developing countries to all of a sudden know this technology and know how to produce these vaccines is quite questionable. And in fact, this has proven to be true because a lot of developing countries that are producing their own vaccines um, are uh, are not able, even people who want to move abroad from those countries and they've been vaccinated locally, do not get the chance just because of the type of vaccine they've taken, right? So if you take an American vaccine, you get access to a lot of countries by default. But if you take something like a vaccine produced locally within India itself, your access is limited. This has been seen with the UAE laws as well, changing for Indian expats to come back to the UAE. Another thing also was about, in terms of quality control, Johnson and Johnson's in Baltimore saw that there were cases of defective vaccines. They were within the same country and still there were issues in the quality of vaccines. So imagine outsourcing this to the world. Potentially, quality control would significantly reduce. And that's why I proposed the idea that, in fact, the government should force these companies or fund these companies to increase their production, lower their cost of production as well, in order to maintain the supply. And they've done so because, for instance, Pfizer has announced that it would be giving away, not giving away, it would make sure that 3 billion vaccination shots would be given by the end of this year, which is better than last year, which was 1.2 billion, close to 3 times the amount. They've been working on it. Like I would say with the example with Zoom, right? Zoom, it took a step of evolution, right? They had to make mistakes. They had to start off from somewhere. And slowly, slowly, they caught up onto it and they made things better. Um, and the same thing I do expect with these companies to do so. And they hold a huge responsibility on the lives of millions of people. And I do believe that they will do their best in order to overcome this situation.
I
Also
think
from my
fantastic, yeah, fantastic take, Edwin. And I think that just leads me right to Mazen. And Mazen, you've been smiling a lot at a lot of the comments. So I really want to hear your take. Edwin's kind of putting it on the corporates, saying, corporates must think, beyond dollars and dimes when it comes to intellectual property. What is your take on this? And do you think corporates are doing enough to protect their intellectual property and at the same time doing enough for the society?
Okay, so I've taken actually some comments about like the whole port after what I was talking about. So a company can protect its employees to some point. After that point, it's more of the employer himself being able to take care of the company's data. So let's say I support you with all I can and the security systems and all of that and tell you where to store your data and more than that. But the breaches happen because of the employee himself not being able to take care of the small details that might cause these breaches. Now, if we're talking about Zoom comparing to Webex, now Zoom isn't compared to Webex at all, actually, since it's very unsafe till now. Even with their upgrades, still unsafe. Let's see. So there was security researchers have found that several major vulnerabilities in Zoom has been found till today in stealing Windows passwords. So basically, even if I put a password to the meeting, I can still have access to it. Other reports that Apple was forced to step in to secure millions of devices that have the applications stored in them, Zoom applications stored in them. Since, as they say, that there is a secret web server on users that have the application and the attendees of any meeting. Of course, as we already mentioned, Zoom bombings, and yeah, that's for about Zoom. So next we'll go on the identity theft in the medical sector. So I don't know much about medical sector, but actually, like 2 weeks ago, my mom contacted me, and she works in the medical sector in Germany, and she told me that currently they're giving exams to most of the people in the medical sector. These exams are basically about identity theft. Intellectual and the medical research, intellectual property to protect the medical researches that have been developed. So basically, these researches are like the exams are like parts for these whoever works in these sectors to protect themselves and their fellow like mates for the researches not to be leaked or to go like abroad to anywhere. Hopping off to VPNs. You were talking about VPNs. Yes, VPNs are actually very approachable. They're not safe. We don't know the resources of the people who made these VPNs and like where their IPs are coming from. So no, VPNs are not safe at all. But we are kind of forced to use it in our current situations. So yes, technology. In our current times, we keep asking for more technology, which keep getting us more problems, more identity theft, more problems like with more years. Let's put an example as Tesla, or not actually Tesla, but other cars that try to develop autopiloted cars. If you ever heard about accidents that happened because of people who put their cars on autopilot, yes, it happened. It's actually not that safe as people think it is. It's not 100% safe. I'm not saying it's not safe at all, but it's not 100% safe. So you can't basically just sleep and let the car drive you. No, it's not that. It doesn't work that way. So yes, this is a problem in data and in us wanting more and more technology, as in safe houses. There have been a lot of cases of houses being burnt because of a very small problem in their safe house or smart house. Hopping next to ethics and mortality in technology. Basically this. So we've taken this in our first lecture in this subject, actually. I still remember Dr. Zina talking about it. We set our own ethics. So the problem in technology is everyone sets their own ethics. So if I'm a hacker, I have my own ethics. If I'm a normal student, I have my own ethics. So everyone has their own ethics. So for some people, they might not have enough ethics to actually just bypass some information that might be useful for them. So if I see information that I might be able to use, I will take it. That's your problem that it was leaked. So it also comes back to the point of everyone has their own ethics and mortality. Okay, hopping to the next point. I'm really sorry for taking so much time. The UAE, actually, we're kind of blessed to be here in the UAE, since the system security and like the amount of protection we get on social media and other like anything that has to do with the internet. Actually, we have so much protection so we live in this country. UAE has actually developed a whole security team to protect like people who live in the country from any dangers, and we actually have a hotline for any like for a report that anything can happen. We can report it straight away to the police, 24 hours actually, which helps people to protect their like data or anything as soon as possible. So let's say my card number gets leaked. Who will be faster, calling the police or calling the bank? Actually, the bank might take more time to answer your phone call, but calling the police itself will literally take a second, since their lines are 24 hours and they're more helpful than actually calling your bank, since they can actually stop the process immediately. Now to my last point, which is COVID vaccines. Now, I don't know anything about COVID vaccines, actually, nothing at all. And I don't want to go in COVID vaccines, but like countries being provided and like COVID vaccines and all of that. What I think is countries helping each other in vaccine, like in the vaccine issue, are all connected to like a bigger idea of, there are more to it. We're not just sending you vaccines because we like your country. No, that's not it. There is more to it. So like there is more to the deal that still will be revealed maybe in the next couple of years. Also to another point, which is not just Tesla, since I mentioned Tesla in my example, but that's not the only example. In 2020, there has actually been a lot of these cases, and Tesla and Apple and Microsoft and Discord and a lot more huge companies that's worth billions, not just millions, breaches that cost them actually millions, another millions. And we see this in stock markets going down because of these breaches and thefts. Also, like, yeah, that's it. I think that's it.
Thank you so much for those comments. Let me come back to the second point that I'd asked. So, do you think the corporate sector is doing enough, A, to protect their intellectual property, and B, to protect to work for the society?
I'm not going to say all companies, but companies that mainly focus on technology do protect their employees as much as they can. But the problem is, with that much protection, also employees kind of feel like they're closed up. So this actually might cause employees to have like, a second thought about that type of stuff that came in the Tesla employee that actually breached data. So they do protect their employees as much as they can. And it's kind of, yes, it does help. Like for the other part of the question, it does actually help them a lot. Since like if I work in a big company, it's like it basically gives me all the resources to protect myself and the company. So I won't be in any dangers of basically being sued for any information leaked in case of anything that happens. So yeah, it does. So actually the corporate section does protect them a lot, but not our own companies, of course.
Right. So at this point, I'll jump to Mahin. Mahin, again, Mazen has also mentioned about the technology. Do you think the technological companies, the kind of platforms that are out there that have supported remote work, have done enough in terms of not just securing their platform, but even like informing their customers or the clients and the users of how to make the most of the security features that they have so that they can protect their intellectual properties?
Well, since the pandemic, it happened quite suddenly, and in the first few months, like nobody knew what to do with it, let alone like technological companies with these softwares. They didn't know that they would become so popular or their sales would grow so much. But for about their privacy features and letting their customers know of what's going on in the background, initially, like if you take Zoom as an example, because I'm not too sure about Webex, but like about Zoom as like the prime example, because it has been in the news for these related issues like for so long, and it still is, even though it's been like so long now. It's been like about like a year and a half, maybe more. So initially though, for all the, well, they weren't prepared, but then that just makes you question like, do we need to have a pandemic for these companies to, you know, realize that they need to have more privacy in their softwares? Because even before this happened, people were still using them, but because it wasn't so popular that their loopholes or like the problems in their security never really came into the spotlight before. But because of the sudden increase in their usage and sudden, you know, highlights on remote working as a whole, Zoom never really came forward and told people that, you know, these are the issues that we have. You know, they were always found by someone or some organizations or some people who questioned Zoom, you know, send them email or like came, you know, like in the news and stuff that, you know, these are the problems that we faced, or what do you have to say about it, for them to actually do something about it. And in most cases, like in many of the cases, they never really commented on them. Like there was like out of like the tens or thousands, like, you know, cases that they came across, they commented on like the one about, you know, sharing the information with Facebook, and they were like, we're going to work on that one. But there were many that they didn't, you know, really openly speak about, and they had to be like pushed on like for so many cases for them to actually, you know, start working on it even more. And even now they also actually came in the spotlight for not teaching people about, you know, what problems or like about their privacy features. So if a new user was to use Zoom, they would not really get like, you know, like a list of, you know, how you can make things more secure for yourself. You just sort of have to go around and figure it out all by yourself. So in that case, in that sense, I don't think they're doing as much as they should, seeing how important and integral, you know, they have become for, you know, people's privacy. And it's not just on a corporate level. Now Zoom, like in countries like, okay, for example, in UAE, where, you know, WhatsApp calls and such are not available to users, and of course VPNs are again against the law. So Zoom is something that, you know, even your families would use to talk across countries. So even for their like, you know, personal, like even their privacy or their safety, it becomes like a big thing. And I think it has always been used, but like, so it's like a big question mark of what kind of information like these people lost before, you know, Zoom came to realize that, oh, you know, we have some work to do. Yeah, we are not really providing the best for our customers. So yeah, in that case, I believe like, you know, they could do
Yeah.
better.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maheen, for that insight. Hassan, over to you. Given everything that you've heard and from what you said right at the beginning, do you still hold that you know, the intellectual property should be made more available more often to, you know, for the general society? Or do you think there needs to be more stringent rights or maybe different types of rights need to be looked at?
Excellent question, ma'am. Professor has asked a very good question. So now this is in case of intellectual property, let's take an example. Imagine you're teaching a class, professor teaching a class, and we have a topic we have to discuss. We discuss it amongst each other. Professor introduces, explains to us this is this and that. We exchange ideas, come up with a new way to make it better. We look at history to make something better as it was before. Now we're just exchanging ideas over here. There's no concept of like patent. No, this is my idea, you can't steal it and stuff like that. We're just exchanging ideas, and professor just wants a little recognition. We discussed it, and so on, we got this idea from here. But and look at the chance of construction workers. They work in a group, they tell each other, okay, fix this, fix that. There's no patent of saying no, you can't construct this way, this is my way. No, you make your own way, make it float or something. No, there's nothing like that. And even like a kid building a sandcastle, he builds a sandcastle. He doesn't say no, you have to pay me money to look at the sandcastle, behold his glory. No, patent, like the intellectual property should be free, like for sharing and everybody, because otherwise it won't help people to develop than what is already have. If the company just say no, this is our work, you need to come up with a different idea, then it will like limit the people of what they can do. Otherwise, if they do make one, they will say no, you copied us, you have to pay for us, we'll take a lawsuit against you. Like just like all the small businesses, the Facebook and Apple and Amazon, they buy the asset, to like reduce the competition, or they take the data, make an identical one, knowing that the small businesses can't rise up against them because since they're small businesses and the big businesses have a lot of money. Example of Professor Shiva, who is in pharmaceutical one. He so far medicines cost a lot. They cost a lot of thousands of dollars, and pharmaceutical companies easily make more than 10 billion, 50 billion, please correct me if I'm wrong, 10 billions of dollars, like even they're selling medicine. Now, so there was a story of a guy who actually had a condition, and he actually was taking medicines like thousands and thousands of dollars, take this much and this and that, and then went into depth, and even he wasn't feeling well. But he went to a country in Amazon, and he figured out that the pharmaceutical companies in the US didn't use still have to discover a lot of plants that are there. 90% of them are not discovered. When he went to Amazon, he went over there, he talked to the people, explained his condition, and then they started laughing at him when they heard that US costs this much of dollars for medicines. And he actually said the Amazons, they give everything for free. There's no intellectual property, there's no patent or anything. You can take the medicine over here for free from the plants and everything. And he actually felt better. He came when he described his journey as being very better. He was able to walk, he was able to do his work, and for free actually. Free intellectual property. There's no suing or anything. Even another person with multiple what was it? It was multiple sclerosis. It's a condition that affects the brain and the spine. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And actually, she also started feeling better, and she was able to walk again in 2 feet without any help. So intellectual property is should be actually free, where people can actually can innovate stuff from the ideas which are already there, and where people don't have to keep suing everybody. And just like one person had mentioned, that all the taxpayer money goes to the judges. You have millions and millions of dollars where people are suing each other about what this is my product, this is this and this is that, that all the taxpayer just goes to waste. How can you make it productive and use the taxpayer money for that kind of work? You can put into more research, more educational, and there's a lot of money already going to military, but it's that's another topic. And also, one person said that VPN are not safe. At the same time, UV protects them, which is also true. Zoom bombing is also a thing, like a professor had mentioned, and other people. And there's also actually an Instagram page that says that we will bomb your class, and then we'll in Zoom bombing actually, that we will come in, we'll disrupt the class, and we just leave without anybody noticing, and so on. So intellectual property should be free for everybody, so that everybody can have help each other, share ideas. Otherwise, it's just limiting creativity.
Okay, so with that, Dr. Shiva, I come back to you. Given what you said as well earlier, that of course we understand you're neither on this side or that side, but given what you've seen during the pandemic and how people are in fact have helped, it has helped not having the patents or the intellectual property rights in place, like speeding up this whole process, for instance. Do you think this should be the norm going forward once, like Holly said, maybe in 2030 when we are looking behind and the pandemic is behind us?
So my take on that is twofold. I mean, first of all, I would say my direct answer would be, it depends on the situation, because one of the things, because I'm weak at economics, I don't know much about economics, but I know a little bit of drug development, how much money that has been invested on drug development. I mean, to be honest, only around less than 10% of the initial ideas will end up as a product of drug that actually cures something. So the rest is wasted. The money invested is wasted. So the companies who invested a lot should take that money back. And that is more or less not the case for this COVID-19, because the government taken away the burden of finance. All the different governments, they paid it. So the company, all they got to do is explore their ideas, develop the mRNA vaccine. So just to go back to, I have a feeling at it's Edwin's question about, he highlighted a very good point about that even in UAE, some of the people who are coming with the jabs taken from certain companies are only allowed. The others are not allowed because it's developed in a country. It's not tested. But I don't think that is not the case. The case is that it's not quality tested. So, for example, AstraZeneca, we got the data to prove that it protects. Remember, it only protects 98%. So what happens to the 2%? So that's a different story. Likewise, Pfizer, same thing. So, but if the India has developed, I mean, they are partners of the Pfizer and they are partners of AstraZeneca, but they are also developing their vaccine. But the problem is because this is where the economic come into play, because of they don't have the money to do this mass testing or preclinical testing. There's no data available. So if no data available, then whatever the UAE is saying or any other government is saying is acceptable because they don't know. I mean, I can tell you my story as an example. I was a medical doctor in my country. When I moved over here to UK, I did a PhD. So the funny thing is, I am allowed, under the UK medical law, I am allowed to teach the medical student, train the medical student to become a doctor, but I cannot practice the physician. I can't open a medical center. Why? Because my first degree, medical degree, is not recognized or tested to prove it is valid. And that is the problem in this what I call UAE or the laws. I don't think that what they are doing is just because it's from developing country. No, I think the data is not available. So for come to your question, my answer is that if we release if we waive the Intellectual Property Act for things like pandemic, the immediate thing, then that is the must. We need to do that, and I think that itself will enhance these vaccine developers in developing countries to test the vaccine, produce the data in massive amounts so that they can prove something. Right. So that is one part. The other part is that again, I always take paracetamol as an example. So if you buy a paracetamol from GlaxoSmithKline, in UK terms, is about that's £2.60. But Astra paracetamol is 60p. Right. But paracetamol is paracetamol, unless otherwise the people has got some issues or their own issues, like my wife, because for her, the Astra paracetamol would not cure her headache. But for me, it does. So, because the problem with the intellectual property and patency for GlaxoSmithKline, because of that, their price is higher, right? Because they wanted to get the investment back. Right. But the funny thing is, they have already taken the investment back long time ago, but still they are continuing with that product. So this is the problem. But so you need to, I mean, there's no right answer for this. It's depending on the situation. If there is a pandemic, is a life science threat, then yes, we need to share our knowledge, share our expertise, share as a technology. But if it is a normal procedure, there should have some kind of flexibility of the company to get back their investment. But unfortunately, many companies, they're not only getting back their investment, but also they're continuing with it. Right.
Okay, we are almost out of time. So Vidhi, I'm going to pull you in here. If you can just pull out some questions from the Twitter feeds. that we can
Lots,
throw to the panel?
lots of questions, Dr. Zeenat. I don't think we'll have enough time, but I'll definitely pick out a few. So the first question has been asked by Lakshay. He says that, art forms such as dance and yoga are continuously evolving because they haven't been copyrighted. So wouldn't patenting technology limit its growth?
How interesting. Maybe I throw that to Dr. Holly.
I think we've got to get some fundamentals of intellectual property understood very clearly, is that patenting happens on particular types of knowledge. So of a formula or a process or an artifact that's created. Copyright is of intellectual and creative works. So things like dance, there is still copyright that attaches to that. And although in all of the social media that we're seeing now, there's lots of appropriation of different types of intellectual property, but it doesn't limit its growth. And if you look back through how patents have been applied through things like the plain old telephone system, you'll see that there's always been competing development. And depending on where you grow up and where your history is based, I grew up in a Western country that said Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. I've been ably and amply corrected by many of my international students saying, no, no, no. And forgive me, I can't remember the name, many other inventors. But you'll find that most great technologies have had parallel development because it's just a natural evolution of what's happening. And I think that's something we need to keep remembering, that incremental innovation is happening all the time. And patenting is about the core process that underlies something. And then as soon as you build something new on top of that, that forms a new function, there's more patents that need to be developed. So it's an expensive but necessary process.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Holly. Vidhi?
Yes. So the next question has been asked by Shamina. She wants to know if you think that online platforms such as Zoom and Webex, do these platforms hold a responsibility to better inform customers about the negative consequences that could occur when customers use their apps, rather than just asking them to sign the terms and conditions that no one ever reads?
Maheen, probably.
Well, about the terms and conditions, it's not just these platforms, it's pretty much every single website or social media channel that we use. Well, if you think about it, there is no particularly other way that they can come across and tell users about it. I mean, they are mentioning it in the terms and conditions, so it is like a personal responsibility as well for users to read through it. Like, you can't really go or like try and sue them and be like, yeah, but they're so long, why should we read it? You should have a better way of informing us. But then again, like on a regular basis, how exactly can these companies, communicate, because even if it comes in the news or they post it on their social media channels, what are the chances that people will come across and read them? And if they come up like as a pop-up every time you launch the application, then the users are honestly just going to get put off by that and, find it annoying that it's like, it's happening every single time. So the fact that it is in the terms and conditions and they are, sort of like letting you know about it, that's just, it's on the user that you have to like, you should read about something that you are getting yourself into, where you are giving your information willingly and you're not sort of like forced to use it. Nobody's like, putting a gun to your head that you have to use this application. So yeah, you can't really blame the companies like for doing their part and then being like, you're not doing it well enough.
True. I think the onus also is a little bit on the users themselves. Excellent. Vidhi?
Yeah. Yes. So the next question has been asked by Ziad. He wants to know if vaccinations or vaccines should be patented or copyrighted, because if we apply utilitarianism, most people would be happy rather than unhappy if the research behind vaccines would be made open to everyone.
Okay, Dr. Shiva?
To be honest, the patency, I think, as far as I know, that it is only runs for 10 years. That 10 years is to give that company to get back their investment. And after that, it should be given to everyone. And that is the protection for the companies investing. But as for in case of pandemics or the global threat, then I would, I mean, it's my personal opinion, I would support for removing that patency or IP or whatever, because, you know, one of the things we learned from this pandemic is you cannot treat a specific group or specific country. Everybody got to be treated. Otherwise, it will impact. I mean, to be honest, look what happened to New Zealand. You know, they were effectively, you know, free from the pandemic, but because other countries are not fully cured, and there is always a chances of doing that, whatever we are careful. So we need to think about it as a global citizenship rather than, yeah, this is my country. Nothing wrong with that. You know, we need to have some kind of patriotism, but that's a different story. But
Absolutely.
It's a global issue, so it should be globally addressed.
Thank you. Vidhi?
Okay, so there's one more interesting question. Because of the pandemic, a number of employees are still working remotely. What role do companies play in monitoring such employees without invading their privacy?
Oof. Mazen, what do you think?
There are a few points actually. So when a company puts you under their like security system or whatever, I will also have to provide you with like with the atmosphere for you to be able to work in this position. So let's say there is, okay, actually let's take an example. A good example is one of my friends who works in a bank here in the UAE. So basically this friend works at a call center of a bank. His job is to answer customers and like try to solve their problems. He has no like roles to be able to change anything in the account, but he can also see the numbers and all the important information in the account. So what the bank did to protect their customers and their employees is they gave him a laptop that isn't like controlled. It's just a normal laptop. But when the employee opens the system, basically it restricts him for actions that he can do in a call. So basically, if the customer wants to restart his password, the employee himself can't restart the password for him. He'll have to send him a message to be able for him to restart the password from his side. And this is apart from the bank to protect both the customer and the employee.
Right. Thank you so much. Before we go ahead, I think Dr. Holly may leave. So I wanted to just take the moment to thank Dr. Holly for taking the time out and be here with us. Great insights from you, of course. And you've just enriched the conversation that we've had today. Thank you so much, Dr. Holly, for being here. Just in case we don't get a chance to tell you this at the end, I thought let's just tell you that right now, because we do have a couple more questions, I think, Vidhi, coming through.
Thank you.
Dr. Holly?
I've just got a message from husband upstairs, and I'm okay to stay a few more minutes, so everything's.
Oh, cool.
So,
Okay, so Vidhi, please, next question.
Okay, that's great. Our next question is from Eamon. Now, she wants to know if, does a legal document or NDA protect the confidential information that's being shared with employees in a remote environment, or is there a need to amend such laws?
Interesting. Edwin, what do you think?
If you don't mind, Miss Vidhi, could you repeat that? I kind of had some voice issues.
Sure. Okay, so does a legal document or NDA protect the confidential information that is being shared with employees who are working in a remote environment, or is there a need to amend these laws?
Okay, so we're looking at things. So a non-disclosure agreement. So if possible, could you rephrase the question, because I'm finding it difficult to.
So I think what they're asking basically, Edwin, is, given we've got these NDAs which are already there, but, the issue is that everybody's on remote work, they're using technology and they're sharing, their intellectual property across these virtual platforms. Is there a need to revisit these documents and probably, upgrade them somehow? Or does there need to be like a law or a regulation that comes in from the government to, have them as like a mandated thing?
I believe so. It should be. There should be a review of the non-disclosure agreements because not only that, but a lot of awareness has to come into this because employees are just shifting. This is within a span of a year, people are shifting to an online work environment. So first thing is, most importantly, is awareness of what is possible could be happen, and NDAs even further should be updated because a lot of things that we do online or on our laptops, we're not aware of it, right? We're not aware of it. Maybe non-disclosure agreements verbally, all of us are aware of it because we're used to it. We're used to it when we work in a company. You know that certain things cannot be said outside the boundaries of those walls. But when you're at home, you're very comfortable with your computer, everything, right? So certain things like taking care of your company's laptop should not interfere with your personal work.
Mm,
A simple thing, right? If it
right.
does, you're potentially putting yourself at risk of losing intellectual property and putting yourself at trouble and potentially a lawsuit against you. Correct? So
Right.
in one way, I see that definitely NDA agreements should be revisited, amended. There might be a lot to look into, but one of the recommendations I would give is by looking first at a personal computer, one for work, one for at home.
Mm. Okay, thank you, Vidhi.
Yes. The next question has been asked by Ahmed Mohammed. Because the use of online meeting softwares has made IP theft much easier, would mandating offline meetings help protect intellectual property?
Sorry, just last part. My internet kind of disappeared.
Yeah. Because the use of online meeting softwares has made IP theft much easier, would mandating offline meetings help protect intellectual property?
Oh, Dr. Holly, what do you think?
Gee, thank you for that one, Zenith. That's a lovely question. It's a tricky one because where I'm living right now, I can't meet offline. I have to meet online. I don't have a choice. And I'm still not quite sure whether we've proven that there's more theft now. I think what we've just done is raise awareness of it and have shown how easy it is to do. I don't necessarily think we've made it happen more prolifically than it has been. So that's something that I'd always keep in the back of my mind. And if we're working through this phase of learning to live with COVID-19, then we're going to go through phases of not being able to be offline. So how can we best protect ourselves? I just popped into the chat a legal advice website, and no, I haven't done my research, so it looks pretty legitimate, but check it before you take it word for word. That whole article is about working from home in the age of COVID, answers to 10 questions employers should be asking. And it ties in really nicely with a lot of the issues that you've all raised. So I think, yeah, absolutely. Look at that issue. Employers have to look at new ways of working. And one of the arguments that surfaces in Australia is that now that we've proven we can work from home, do we have to go back to the office? or can we actually build this in as a permanent, not necessarily 5 days a week from home, but surely to goodness we don't have to do all this travel and take up all this office space and carbon footprint when I can be doing it from home. But to do that, employees and employers need to make some significant issues. And that website has a really good statement on NDAs to actually revise the NDAs that are there. And if you haven't already got an employee signing up to keep things confidential, to make sure that that's explicit.
Thank you, Holly. Vidhi, maybe last question?
A very good question has been asked just now by Gaurav Avatramani. So he asks, what happens if the person who infringes my intellectual property rights is based overseas?
Interesting. I think maybe Dr. Shiva, what do you think? I mean, because we may actually. Sorry, you're muted?
Can you repeat the full question again?
Yeah. What happens if the person who infringes my intellectual property rights is based overseas?
Yeah, that's what actually happened in the COVID-19 hacking, because most of the hacking came from Russia, actually. That's exactly what's happened. You can't do anything. And especially you don't have any kind of cross-border agreement between the governments. You can't do anything. That's a hole in the intellectual property rights and everything. Like any other laws, there are countries who haven't signed up for the UN Charter, and those countries would be exempted, or not exempted. They exempt themselves by not doing that.
Yeah.
That's the main problem. Yeah, I mean that's the main problem for anything, not only the intellectual property, because there are some rules. I'm a bit of a pirate or Caribbean fan. And it's just like parlay. They are only guidelines, not the rules.
I will jump to Hassan for any last comments, particularly regarding this, because I know you guys also looked at Facebook, Sherlocking, people putting up their ideas to websites. So obviously they're from different countries. What is your take on that? And then Mazen, and then we end.
Since it's remote, yes, there has been a lot from Russia, as like Professor said, from China as well. China has been blamed for a lot of things, and China doesn't like to keep their secrets hidden and not like to share so much. Yes, but that's the thing about intellectual property, that it's not perfect. It's always with the rapidly changing times, there's always intellectual property needs to be changed as well, but it's kind of slow to change and kind of hard to adapt to what's happening right now. So yeah, all these things happen, but at the same time, there could be improvement. That's which could happen. And as Professor said, that patents are not what's the word? That's the word. I kind of forgot. I'll end it there.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Mazen, 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds. So, first of all, talking about Russia, the hacks being made in Russia, actually, it's been for so long. That's because of them being able to grow their computer science knowledge in a young age and actually interact with hacking materials and all of that in a very young age, which is very impressive actually. And on the other side, pretty scary since they can actually do that type of stuff. Second of all, the comment about the question itself is that yes, there are authorities that can actually help you solve your problems if it's a board, but it's not through all countries and it's not through all issues. If the issue is actually big, like we discussed in lecture 3, the amount taken was about 50 million, and in that case they did actually form an authority that will help them to get back the money because of the amount. So yes, it can be solved, but also depends on the case itself. If it's worth putting up the effort to form an authority that will actually solve this problem. But yes, it is possible to solve overboard and more.
Okay, with that, we are actually at the top of the hour where we need to finish. So thank you so much once again, our invited speakers, Dr. Shiva, Dr. Holly. What amazing insights you've brought to the panel. And our student speakers, bravo, guys. You really pushed the conversation forward, and your research was so in-depth. And, you guys spoke like confident experts in the topics themselves. So well done on that. Well done to your teams who obviously supported you so that you could be here. To the whole class for attending, for the amazing Twitter feeds that have been coming through. Like I've been looking at it, I was like, oh my God, Vidhi is not going to get through all those questions. Vidhi, thank you so much for moderating the Q&A. Thank you once again, everyone, and we hope everybody has a wonderful weekend.
Is it possible for me to intervene one additional question, if possible?
Question. So we will end it here, and
Sure,
then
no problem.